How much discipline is too much discipline? What even is discipline? Do we need it to have well-behaved and well-adjusted kids? Does timeout really work? These and other juicy questions we're going to be tackling in today's video. So keep watching. But first, hello and welcome. My name is Julie. I hold a doctorate in occupational therapy and I coach moms to go from feeling overwhelmed and stressed to feeling calm and confident in their parenting. I have 3 kids of my own, so I'm experiencing young childhood on a daily, hourly basis. I'm right there with you, and I have used tips, tricks, my experience along the way to really help me go from surviving to thriving. So I hope you will consider subscribing and follow along. I also have a podcast and a weekly newsletter that I send out, chock-a-block filled with great value, parenting tips, hacks, all the good things. So make sure you check out the links down below so you can sign up for those. Go ahead and listen to the podcast. Leave me some suggestions of things you want me to talk about, either here on the video or on the podcast. And with all that said, with that big mouthful out of the way, let's jump right in. So I'm going to read you what the Oxford Dictionary defines as discipline, because I think sometimes we have our wires crossed and we use the term a little incorrectly. All right, so the definition is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, using punishment to correct disobedience. And it even states a lack of proper parental and school discipline. This implies that we heavily associate the word discipline with schooling and kids and parenting. When I read this definition, I can get behind it until they say punishment to correct disobedience. And that's when I'm feeling like my vibes are a little off when it comes to using the word discipline and our children. I think a lot of the way that we shape a human's behavior, children's behavior, how they interact, is how we set them up for success. As an occupational therapist, I'm huge on how our environment can hinder or help us. And the same thing happens with kids and discipline. How are we paying a part in how they behave? And so when we talk about punishing for disobedience, that phrase really doesn't sit well with me, because I don't think it really helps long term. And I'm going to explain why in this video. So words carry a lot of weight, and I think it is important that we fully understand definitions of things when we use them so flippantly. And after really understanding and unpacking the definition of discipline, I'm not sure that I would use that word. I would rather like to think of how do I mold and shape my child's behavior so that they behave and respond in a way that is acceptable to me, society, our cultures. There's a fine line between brainwashing children and inspiring them to behave in a certain way, but I really don't think that we should be using fear, which is what punishment essentially is, to make them do something. Because what happens when you have a sort of master in a situation, so the parent, someone who's in authority, kind of, forcing a child who is not an equal into submission or to behave in a certain way, they do it purely out of fear, not because they want to or they are intrinsically motivated. And as they grow, as they become bigger, as they have more power, this can lead to a lot of problems. And I think traditionally, a lot of us probably know people or can relate to people or were the people that were screamed at, shouted at, that were beaten up as children. Corporal punishment is something that definitely has been evident in my lifetime. Corporal punishment, if you're not familiar, is when it was allowing of adults essentially to beat children or smack them on the hands at school. And it was only recently abolished, at least in my home country in South Africa, in I feel like the early 1990s. So that wasn't that long ago, and yet it's still very pervasive in how people raise children. The research shows that this doesn't help. This actually starts to make the brain shut down. It has long-term consequences for emotional behavior and intelligence, and that shouting and beating or smacking a child really almost equate to the same levels of fear when they've done studies. So for me, it's really a no-go. As frustrating as parenting can be, and as much as sometimes you want to just emotionally explode, hitting your children or even shouting at them is not the answer, and the research shows that. Never mind the compassion side of things. When discipline really became a thing for me was with my first child. As he became a toddler, I started to realize that, hey, my sweet little baby is not going to do what I just think anymore. He's not going to stay in the same place. He might not want to be dressed when I want him to get dressed. He's not going to come with me when I want him to come, because he has a mind of his own, right? He is doing what he is supposed to do, which is kind of testing boundaries, becoming autonomous, all these good things. At the time that this was happening though, I still didn't really know how to handle it. I didn't feel like I had the skills or experience because I didn't. And I researched a lot. One of the two people that I came across was someone called Magda Gerber and Janet Lansbury. And Janet Lansbury has taken a lot of inspiration and based a lot of her work on gentle parenting from Magda Gerber. Janet Lansbury is a great resource. She's very active nowadays, and parents really, really love her style and her philosophy. And this is where I really dove into the idea of, shouting at children, kind of these maladaptive behaviors that can occur. And it really shaped how I approached my children and how I leaned into the idea of intrinsically helping them to be motivated, not just me telling them something, but really explaining, as is age appropriate, what the consequences are, using a sort of action consequence model, which kind of disciplines them in and of itself. And I will explain a little bit more. There are so many natural actions and consequences that exist. We had a recent example with our 5-year-old where she wanted us to print out pages from the internet of coloring that she wanted to do. And there was some kind of miscommunication, I feel like, on her end. Perhaps she wasn't getting what she expected. I printed out a piece of paper for her. She didn't like what it looked like, which is her right, but then she proceeded to kind of scribble, scrabble all over it, bunch it up into a ball and throw it in the trash. And I said to her, well, we can't be doing that because we haven't even had an opportunity to color. Maybe someone else in the family would like to color. You can't go ahead and just scrunch it up, throw it out, and then expect a new piece of paper. And to me, that's kind of a natural consequence. Was she happy about it? No. Did I need to scream and shout? No. I was very calm. I was very clear. And I also learned for myself that I need to be very clear about the action leading to the consequence for her so that she can learn and know, and then really reinforce that boundary. But really, actions and consequences are around so much. You don't need to go out of your way to punish a child. You can just let things kind of play its course within reason, and that way they will quickly learn that in order to play this game called life, they have to participate in a certain way. But you didn't click on this video just to hear my rambles on discipline. You want to know some useful steps as to how to get your kids to behave, because let's be honest, we want our children to behave in a certain way out in public. We want them to be polite to their grandparents. We want them to be polite to us. We want our children to be the ones that get invited back and back again for play dates because they have manners, they listen, they are respectful. And that is why I think it is important that we look at discipline in a slightly different way. So I'm going to teach you some of the top things that I use with my kids to ensure that we get re-invited back for a play date. So number one, and this is really a universal principle when it comes to parenting, but role model behavior. You think that what you're doing has no effect, but it has a massive effect, positive and negative. Ensure in yourself, if you can, and I think this is why parents feel so much pressure to be perfect, but ensure in yourself that you are treating your peers, you're treating other children, you're treating your spouse, people that only your kids will see you interact with behind closed doors, with the respect that you want them to have. So I can't even tell you, even to this day, 7.5 years into parenting, I am still reminding, nudging, urging, encouraging my children to say please and thank you. Now what happens is their default, because please and thank you is really just a construct that we have created in society. It's not, intuitive. I still will have them come up to me and they'll say, can I have a washcloth or something? And maybe I'm doing the dishes, I have to stop what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter. And I will pause and I will look at them. And it'll take them a second and they'll say, please, can I have a washcloth? And the same with thank you. I'll wait and they'll say thank you. I don't really have to do anything else. But I want to reassure you that I still still have to role model this behavior 7 years in. It's nothing that happens overnight. And even though it doesn't feel like they're watching and listening and absorbing, they are. And I know they are because my 7-year-old will parent my 5-year-old. And when she doesn't say please, whether this is his role or not is not for me to determine in this video, but he will tell her to say please, or tell her to say thank you, or tell her to do something or in order to do something else. So he is definitely listening. Another real tip that I have, and I use this on a regular basis, especially if you have a child that might be prone to emotional outbursts, which is the fancy word for tantrums. Talk to them when they are in a good mood, when it is not heated. So discuss when it is not heated. So for example, I described that example of my daughter taking the piece of paper, scrubbing it up and throwing it away, not even in the recycling. She was mad, her expectations were not met, and she has a right to be frustrated, for sure. But we spoke about it the next day when she was more calm, when she was feeling better, when she had the bandwidth to really talk about it, so that I hope through doing that I'm not reprimanding her in the moment. I can reassure her and, tell her that I know that this is frustrating and that she wants something different and I'm, insisting on something else and that's hard to deal with. All of those things, but it's not the time to start teaching her lessons. The lesson is in and of itself, that if you're going to treat the paper like this, if you're going to scrunch it up and throw it away and essentially be disrespectful to the paper, and they learn a lot about recycling and the earth and at school, so I spoke about that. The paper comes from trees and we don't want to hurt the earth. I know she hears me, but she often can't really hear me when she's in a moment of outrage. I know that it's going on in there though, and so that's when I choose my moments the next day and the natural consequence occurs. This is a huge one, but be consistent no matter what. So this is the same thing I was saying about the please and thank you, but it's the same with having respect for other people, for modeling behavior, for really enforcing the guidelines, the rules that are appropriate for your family, no matter what. So an example of this could be like, we eat at the table. And we don't eat on the couch, we don't eat in front of the TV. And this for me is a form of behavioral modeling, because I don't want my children messing up my furniture, but I don't want them going to other people's homes and sitting in front of a TV and just eating chips or something, or food, dinner, it doesn't matter, and they're not paying any attention to what they're eating. So we always encourage them to come back to the table to eat their food. And what I've noticed over the years is that in the beginning it's really hard to elicit this habit, because who doesn't want to eat in front of the TV? And it's fine if that's what you want to do. I just want my couches to stay nice for longer. So and I also want them to intuitively eat. But it's become such a habit for my husband and I that we don't even think about eating anywhere else except at a table. So these things with consistency really do pay off over time. When it comes to discipline, it's likely, if you are raising kids in a 2-parent household, that you were raised differently from your partner. I mean, we're all so different. We come with very unique backgrounds. So you need to be super communicative about the hard no's in your family. So for me, a hard no. We do not hit. We do not spank. I'm not sure if there's a difference in that. And we try not to shout. Sometimes that happens and I always feel horrendous afterwards, but most of the time we do not shout. And if we are finding the other one is getting riled up, because that's what happens, that's what kids do. So remember to communicate with your partner, have those hard no's, no bribing, no spanking, no shouting, as best as you can, because that way you will be raising your children as a unit and not so much one playing off another, which definitely leads into bad behavior and the perception that your children are not disciplined, but that's often because the leadership is not consistent. It's not their fault. Set your kids up for success. I can't emphasize this enough. When your environment facilitates good behavior, and I'm going to explain a little bit more what I mean by that, you will have less issues. There will be less opportunity for you to fight. There will be less opportunity for them to need your help with basic things that you feel they are able to do themselves, which will lead to less frustration on your part, more time for you as a person. So all of these good things. So what I mean by set them up for success: are they hungry? Make sure they are regularly fed. Make sure they're going to bed consistently. I have videos all about that. I will link that up above and down below in the description. Your nighttime routine, your routines for efficiency are very, very important to ensuring a holistic, well-behaved child, because they have no reason to act out if their basic needs are being met. The other thing that I recommend is decluttering your home, making it so that your kids know where things are. They're not frustrated when they can't reach things and then they have to come and find you, or they can't put things back. You know, children, what we underestimate is that they want to be independent. They want to be able to do things on their own. If you've ever had a toddler that's trying to dress themselves and you try and help and they're like, no, 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 and they have a total meltdown, or they cry, or they bump their head on the ground because they're so frustrated they can't do it themselves, try and make things easy for them, and in turn you will have a much more well-adjusted child. We also underestimate how environments can stress our kids out, and we want them to be able to go and find things that they want to play with. We want them to be bored and just be able to daydream and be creative, and your environment heavily feeds into that. As I said before, make sure they are not hungry, but in going a step further, provide them with healthy, nutrient-dense food. I did a whole video on how to get your toddler to eat, so I'll have that linked above and in the description box below. But this is really important. People do report that kids will behave differently based on the type of food that they are eating, and in my own research and just kind of using myself as a bit of an experiment, that blood glucose spike that we get when we eat very high sugary foods and carbs and things is a real thing. So children feel it too. We really need to be mindful about the refined carbs that we're feeding them, all the sugar that we're feeding them. Cut out the juice, the soda, the whole thing. I can do more videos on food for kids if you like. Let me know in the comments down below. But it really does have an impact on their behavior, and I think a lot of parents can attest to those. Where possible, take them to places that set them up for success. So if you want your children to behave, don't take them to the ballet or the opera if they are not ready for that yet, because that's not a place where a child can really shine in their good behavior. Be picky and selective about where you take them, within reason. Picky about the friends and people that you hang out with. Now, other friends for your kids can really impact your children's behavior. We know how children can learn other things from other kids, and so if you want them to be well behaved, be selective about who you hang out with, because that is going to impact how they behave too. Read books that demonstrate the behaviors that you want to emulate to your children. So use stories and third parties as an objective way to teach them about good behavior and how this child responded in that. Ask them questions, get them to tell you their opinions on what they feel like could have been done better in a situation, and get them thinking on the other side. When they do behave well, praise them. Really lock in with the compliment of, you did such a good job navigating that situation. I really saw how you shared so nicely with so-and-so, and that must have made them feel really good. How does it feel like when someone shares with you? Blah, 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 blah. That really goes a long way, and you might not think it makes a difference in the moment, but over time it compounds, and I think it really shapes how a person, a child, interacts in society. Incentivize, don't bribe. So when you have issues or things that you feel like you want your child to do more or do less of, don't go straight to bribing. Like, if you do this, I'll give you a cookie. Like, maybe there's a time and place for that. Maybe when you're at the doctor, they need an injection or something. Yeah, okay, that's up to you. But if you want long-term behavioral change, you really have to tap into intrinsic motivation. So here's an example in my own life. We recently tried to get our kids to practice writing more, reading and writing, but let's just say writing more. And initially it was a bit of a struggle, and we were struggling as parents to be consistent. We have 3 kids, where life is busy, blah, blah, blah. They don't really want to do it. So how do we get this to become a habit so that we can be doing this every day as part of our routine? So what we did was incentivize, and a number of ways to do this. The first thing that I did was that I really spoke to my kids, because now they're old enough to understand why we are doing something. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to high school classes or school classes where you had to take a subject that you hated and you didn't even know why you were doing this, and you saw no practical application in the real world. To be fair, you were probably like 15 or 16 at the time. What do you really know about the real world? That's just my opinion now of my 15-year-old self. But you understand the analogy. And so I really spent a lot of time talking about with writing, once you can write faster or more clearer, it takes you less time, your hands aren't going to be tired, people can read your work and really understand what you're saying, people can really see what's in your head because it's now written down on a piece of paper, right? And that was kind of the incentive and the rationale behind why I was encouraging regular writing every day, as an example. I also found that they loved some puffy stickers. I found $5 stickers at Target, like a whole bunch of them, and even that simple acknowledgement of me going through their work every day and giving them a little sticker, they were thrilled. I didn't feel like I was bribing them, and they were happy for the most part to do the exercises that I was asking of them. And then what happens when you're trying to implement a new behavior, the same with, say, riding a bike, it starts off really tough, but once you get it, once it's easier, there's so much less friction and resistance to getting them to do it again and again because they've kind of gone over the hump. And I found that with the writing example as well. It started off very challenging. As we did it more, they got more proficient at it, and so it wasn't so difficult and they were happy to do it. Something that's super important to remember when your kids are having a meltdown, when they are behaving badly in your presence, or they're behaving like it feels like they're behaving out of control, you have to shift your mindset, and it's really hard to do this in the moment, but when you are feeling calm, know that you are a safe space for them, and that is why they're breaking down in front of you. They don't do that just in front of everybody because they don't feel safe in front of everybody, and it is kind of a privilege that they are showing you their true colors. So let them be who they are, meltdown, warts and all, let that emotion move through them. You will likely get over it, move on to something else. Kids really, experience high emotions and then it's over. The cloud passes and they move on and they're happy. And it's as if nothing ever happened. It's important for them to move that energy and to get those feelings out. Plus, they don't have the emotional fluency to express how they are feeling in words, and so they show you through their bodies. Their bodies literally express, shake, kick, scream, shout, do whatever they need to do to get the feelings out as they mature and have more emotional fluency. So where you can, recognize this as a privilege that you get to witness the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole spectrum of your child and all of their emotions. You're here to witness it. It's the roller coaster of parenting. And I think at the end of the day, we would all agree that that is a gift. So I want to know from you, what are your thoughts on disciplining children? Has it changed since you've had your own kids? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, I would so appreciate if you can subscribe, like this video, and check the little notification bell, and share this video with someone who might find it helpful, someone who has young children or is learning to understand the world of childhood and discipline. Do you believe in timeouts? Because I've never really found them to be necessary. If you follow all of those steps, you won't need them. So let me know what you think, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. And remember, mamas, you've got this.